This is an Ellis Mowers and More small engine repair. Stay connected on Instagram and Facebook at Ellis Mowers and More. Comments or questions? Leave them below or email me, ellis@ellismowers.com. Parts used in today's repair are found using the links in the description below. And as always, like and subscribe for more small engine content. On today's repair, we're clicking out these lawn tractors, getting ready for spring. This is one that I wish I had gotten to about a year and a half ago, honestly. It's been sitting right there in the front of the backyard, just waiting its turn, and it's finally going to get it here. So this is a Craftsman. This is one of the garden tractor Craftsmans from sometime in the late 90s, maybe around the year 2000. We'll check the date code and model number here in a second. This one's got the 20.5 horsepower Kohler V-twin. It's the Kohler Command V-twin, so not the old Magnum opposed twins. I've got one out there that I would like to get to this off season. We'll see if that materializes as well. I love these garden tractor Craftsmans. This one's got the hydrostatic on it, big rear tires, and the big wheels overall. When I got it, I think I paid $100 for this. And when I got it, it was actually in better condition, obviously, because it had been sitting in a shelter or under dry storage for a while. Rear tire, left rear tire has already gone flat after pumping up last night. The right rear is still in pretty good shape. I have another set of garden tractor tires here if I need them. I hope I don't. But I think we can make this one into a really, really nice machine. It's got the 46-inch deck. All the spindles and pulleys are turning freely. It is missing the top primary deck belt for some reason, but those are easy to get. And got a couple other issues right off the top that I need to resolve, but we're going to get into it. I'll give you a nice walk around. I know a lot of people absolutely love these things, and to the right buyer, this is going to bring some really good money, especially because of how good of a condition it is in. So let's go ahead and get started on this, and hopefully it won't take a lot to get it back going again, but only time will tell, right? So I felt a little guilty because this tractor's in such nice shape. At the time, I didn't have any inside storage for it, so I had to sit outside for about a year. Still looks good, though. We're going to work on it pretty good here. It isn't going to look like new, but it's going to look pretty darn good after we sort everything out. Gold lettering for the Craftsman with the hunter green probably suggests it's probably like a 97 or a 98 model. Maybe a shade newer than that, but right in that year. We'll see in just a second. Looking under the hood, like I mentioned, 20.5 horsepower Kohler Command V-twin. Pretty good engine overall. It's got the big muffler on it, so it should run pretty quiet. Batteries from 2019, which kind of gives me an idea of when this thing was parked. And one of the things that needs to happen on it that I've noticed, I don't have a light, which I can't show you very well, but underneath here, this is where the oil drain is, and the oil drain is loose and floppy. Looks like it's about to fall off. So I don't know if that's going to be going to the extent of having to jack the engine up. I know I can take this muffler off, but I don't know how well I can get into there because I have to take this secondary pipe off down here in order to get that off. I'm going to make sure this mower turns over before I go venture into doing all of that. Make sure that it has spark and everything along those lines. If it has spark and it turns over pretty good, then we're probably going to be in good shape. Like I said, 46-inch deck. I do not know the condition of the blades. We can probably salvage those blades as long as none of them are bent. Have to save us a couple of bucks. They are starting to lose their edge a little bit, but they still have good lift, so I think that'll work out okay. We are missing the spring for the discharge chute. I should be able to find one. I think it's the same exact as like the 42-inch decks. So, hydrostatic, gas tank in the back. We are going to have to do a complete fuel system clean out on this. And I'll show you here why in just a second. Here's your model number, 917251520. And I was a little bit newer on the date code, but the serial number is 060696. So this tractor was made June 6th of 1996. Electric PTO. And one thing I don't like about these machines is that they have the plastic ignition switch, which were horrendous. But this one seems to still be in good working order. I put a little bit of lubricant on it just to help it out a little bit. This left rear tire is the one that's flat already. It was flat last night after I pumped it up. Maybe if we load it up with ATF, it'll stay up because the tread on them is still pretty decent. Looking over here, I don't know why this happened, but somebody cut the fuel line right between right here and right here where the fuel pump is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this rear fender and just run fuel line all the way from the back of the where the tank is all the way up to the front. Like I said, as long as this thing does turn over and run like it's supposed to. The front tires have tubes in them, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. A little bit of play in the steering, but nothing ridiculous. We'll grease everything up. The front end has a little bit of play in it, but that's pretty typical of a tractor this age that has been used. Like I said, the battery's from 2019. We're missing a primary deck belt, but everything else on the deck looks pretty good, so we're in good shape there. Let me assess things. I'm going to hook a jump box to this and just make sure that we can at least get it to turn over without, make sure all the safety switches are good and things along those lines. Well, I've got my jump box hooked up, and what I can do, let me grab my spark tester as well. And what I'm going to do is, let me put it on the other plug here for you, so that y'all can hopefully see it as well. Currently I don't have any power when I turn the switch on, or when I turn the switch to the start position. So I'm kind of balancing, trying to, let's see if I can see it from right there. So I'm jumping the starter terminals. So the ignition switch does work in the on position. I have had an instance where the ammeter has shorted out and it won't cause, or it'll cause it not to run. So let's see. So you can hear that the fuel solenoid comes on. And then trying to jump the terminals here. Come on now. Just did it a second ago. That's good, and we have spark, so that's a plus. Now, it could just be a bad starter solenoid, but what I need to do, take the battery out and just trace some wires to make sure, because let's see, I just don't know if, like I said, I just don't know if that switch is good. I'm probably going to replace that switch regardless. And I just have to figure out what wires are supposed to go where in order to do that. Just because those plastic switches are horrendous on these things. And honestly, may just need a starter solenoid. So we'll see when I trace the wires what happens here. Try and give you all an idea of electrical testing that I do here. So these Craftsmans, you have your red wire is like your trigger wire to your starter solenoid from the ignition switch. Now the first step that I've done is I've pulled the 5-pin harness off of the ignition switch. We're going to turn it on, turn the multimeter on the ohm setting. Now there are 2 ports where there are red wires going into the ignition switch. One of them is, for this one, is the PTO. It's got 2 red wires going into it. Now you can measure the continuity between the PTO and those 2 red wires by just marrying those by, let's see, by putting it where the red wire goes into the PTO switch and goes into the ignition switch. We got 0 ohms. Now there's a single red wire on one probe here that has your continuity. This one goes from the ignition switch to the ammeter to this fuse block here, or this fuse, and then out to the trigger wire for the starter solenoid. And when we check that, we also have full continuity. So we've got everything power-wise going to the starter solenoid correct, save that the ignition switch is good, which we'll test that here in a minute. The starter solenoid is looking really rough, so I'm suspecting that that's what it is. If you want to check to make sure all your safety switches are good, pull your white wire going to this that plugs into the starter solenoid, and then plug it into your white wire terminal, which on this one is the bottom of the mower. And we had full continuity here earlier. We don't anymore for some reason. But I can see, I can run it up here, and I have 0 on this side, 0 on this side. But then I don't know why I don't have 0 right here, because I did earlier. Okay, I do now. That was kind of weird. I guess it just didn't want to probe right or something. I may have a connector issue. I don't know. Fully know for sure. But I don't have a safety switch issue. So that's a good thing. So I'm thinking that we just need to change the starter solenoid out, just because, number one, it looks pretty rough. Number two, it's very easy to do. And it's accessible on this machine, which is great. So I just need to get a 7/16 to take off those, and then it looks like there's 1/3 to get it off of one side here. And unplug your black wire, unplug your white wire, and you're in good shape. So I did replace the fuse. The fuse looked pretty bad, and we have continuity from the positive terminal across for the power for the trigger wire, and then we have continuity across the white wires for the grounding of all the stuff to make it crank, like all the safety switches and stuff. All right, so we've got good things happening. But the jump box just went out, but still. On, start. Fantastic. So, I'll tell you what happened right after I finished recording that previous clip. What I did is I looked at I tested that continuity one more time. Y'all know that white wire I was having a little bit of trouble with getting continuity in? Well, I'm pretty sure that the connection at the PTO switch was a little dirty. Also, the connector wasn't fully seating down here at the ignition switch. And so I kind of blew off the connector here at the PTO and made sure that it was securely fastened down here at the ignition switch, probed the white wire, and got 0 ohms from the terminal on the ignition switch to the terminal on the starter solenoid. And so I knew that that was good to go then. And sure enough, that's what ended up being the issue. Now, one other thing I want to test. Let's see if we can turn that on PTO clutch. Engaging and disengaging. So that's excellent. So, now that I know all that, now that I know it has spark, what I want to do before I even put any oil in this is get this oil drain situated here. It may take a little bit of finessing and just because of the tight quarters, but I think I'm gonna, I don't want to have to unbolt things in order to get that on again tighter, but I think I'm just going to clean it good with brake cleaner and just see what I need to do. This muffler can come off by itself, and it's just, I think, a couple of 7/16. I don't know if it even, I think it just braces on this side, so super easy to do that, to pull off. And then I just got to figure out how to get that oil drain tighter because it's of how loose it is. But in terms of the starting ability of this machine, we've gotten that sorted, so that's a big plus. And then we'll, like I said, we'll move on to tightening up the oil. After we do that, we'll spray some starting fluid in it, make sure it runs on starting fluid, and then we'll go ahead and go to town on the fuel system. Exhaust is off. I took the hood off just to get better access, and I took the air cleaner off. The good news is that air filter looks like it was just recently replaced before this machine was parked. Looking up underneath here, let me get down here so I can show y'all. So there's that oil drain that's all definitely not like it needs to be. But the problem is the access to it, I can't get a wrench on it really to turn it where it is. I could potentially try and turn off this end here. I got to get that oil and stuff that's caked on it off. But like, will it unscrew all the way up here, because I can't really get a pipe wrench in right here in order to unscrew it right there. So my option after that is to pull the engine up and screw it in tighter like that. I'm not sure exactly what my next steps are. I'm going to see if I can get this pipe off from right here up to where this 90 is. And if I can do that, then maybe I can screw this 90 in a little bit more and hopefully, you know, get it tight, because that's definitely where my oil leak is coming from, and it's leaked pretty bad because there's no oil left in it. So let me see what I can do here. We may have to pull the engine. Hopefully not, though. It's not going to be terribly difficult, but I have to get like this plate off that has this pulley on it, and have to pull the PTO switch at least. And this is the PTO clutch plate, so that means I'd probably have to take the whole PTO clutch off. It's always a pain to get back on whenever you take them off, but let me see what I can manage here, and I'll let y'all know what route I end up taking here. All of this effort just to get one more thread tightened on that oil drain. Of course, like I said, it was loose. I don't know why these things work themselves loose over time. But everything I had to do in order to do this, so I had to grind down the edge of the actual 90-degree a little bit. Grind the block a little bit, because whenever it was turning, it was catching on the block. Obviously, the big thing was we removed the muffler, but I took the 4 mounting bolts off of the engine, put the engine up, propped it up with a brick, and took off, let's see where that plate is. This plate right here for this is to help like a belt alignment and stuff, but it's also doubles as like engine supports, or where the engine mounts up on the rear of this. You have a couple of spacers here for the engine that we've got to get sorted back out before we put it all back on. But this is all on now, thankfully. We have the oil pipe and stuff, or the other pipes here, which I'll clean up, put back on. All for one little thread. But what it'll do is it'll keep it from moving, and that's what we want it. Because as it keeps moving back and forth, if it's loose, it's going to seep oil past the threads. There was a little bit of oil in it, but this is all that was in it. So maybe 12 ounces or so. So not a lot. But what we'll do, we'll go ahead and put everything back together here. The wiring harness is kind of zip tied in and all around, so I didn't take all that off. When I wash the machine, I'll do my best to get all the oil off of this little area here. I just want to hear it run and dry first, honestly, because it's going to be really cool if we're able to do that here today, actually. So we'll see what we can do. I got to get this back on though, get all the PTO clutch and things back on. PTO clutch is always a bear to line up, so you just have to remember you have to line it up. Let me get over here to show y'all. You have to line it up with the little thing here where the pins go, wherever it mounts to, and then also you have to slide that keyway up into the keyway of the engine, and it can be a little complicated if you're not careful. So this is also the double stack pulley, which couples on top of the this. So we'll get all that back together. I'll show you how it all goes back, and then I'll put some oil in it, change the oil, or put a new oil filter on it as well, and then we'll spray some carb spray in, make sure that everything is firing like it's supposed to, that'll run on starter fluid, and then we'll move to the back of the machine and work on cleaning out the gas tank and washing that out, putting in some fresh fuel. Alright, everything is back together. Again, all I had to do was put that plate back on, which also uses the mounting bolts for the engine, make sure them spacers are in there, and then mount the front bolts. Put the pulley back on the bottom, and the PTO clutch, and if I can get down here and show y'all what everything looks like. We shouldn't have any leaks coming from the engine anymore, because I tightened that up nice and tight, and that's kind of the pattern as to how it's supposed to go. You have your transmission pulley that goes above the PTO clutch. Everything's pretty easy except putting that PTO clutch back on, because you have to line everything up. You're under the machine. You can raise the machine up, make it a little bit easier, but you have to line the keyway up with the PTO, or the keyway of the PTO clutch with the keyway of the engine, while sliding it up and holding it in and trying to screw the bolt on. Either way, it is done. Muffler's back on as well. I got the jump box hooked up, and we're just gonna spray a little bit of carb spray in here and see if this thing will kick off. I feel like it will, so. Makes me wonder why this machine was parked, you know? Sounds pretty good. I'll do it one more time just so we can hear it again. Ooh, that's brake cleaner. Probably gonna have to clean the carb on it, but we'll see. That sounds pretty good. I'm happy about that. So what we got left to do now we can go ahead and go through the whole fuel system and see what we can do in order to get all this stuff working again. That's a lot of progress in here in a few hours. So actually just 11, 12, probably worked on about this 2.5 hours or so, on and off. Sounds good. And hopefully the hardest part is over at this point. We just need to get this thing running, and like I said, probably gonna change out the ignition switch just because of how that plastic ignition switch is just terrible. So I'll find one here that works. My next order of business though is to get this rear fender off. Now sometimes these things are a little bit of a bear to get off, but we'll see what we can do. The first order of business, we just have to unplug the seat safety switch here. So I have to get some screwdriver for that. And then we got varnish in the tank a little bit. Doesn't seem like a lot though. I feel a little bit of gas in there, but either way, I gotta get this tank out so that we can get new lines in it. Now in terms of getting this fender off, it kind of looks like it's kind of on the way already. I gotta pull this. You know, you get excited. I get excited to work on everything most of the time. But I've done like 4 MTD mowers here recently, and you know, they're all just kind of plug and play, ho-hum. A little bit difficult to work on. This thing's been fairly easy so far. It's just that oil drain was kind of bad to get around. And it kind of looks like, let's see, bolt wise we have this bolt, these 2 bolts for the seat, which I may not have to take off if I can take off these clips, because I just don't know exactly how these are on. And we're just taking off all the small things now, so like that handle so that I can take this fender off, gas cap, and I'll show you the mounts. So you may have to take those 2 off. I'm not fully sure yet. I don't think you do. I think the seat can just come straight off with it as long as you get rid of the safety switch. Yeah, that bolt in the back, and it looks like you've got these 2 bolts on each side right there in the middle of your screen, and the third bolt right there. And is there a 4th bolt? I don't think there is. So that's shouldn't be too bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bolts should get this out of here. Let me go ahead and work on getting those 7 bolts off, and hopefully this rear fender will just come straight up and we'll be able to clean this gas tank out fairly easily. Alright, so there we are. Just those bolts like I mentioned, nothing extra. Wiggle it up, wiggle that wire for the safety switch out of the way, and voila, we're right here with the fuel tank. Looks like we have a couple more 9/16 to take off. And then it's just a matter of lifting this tank out of here. Y'all can see it's a little bit dirty under here. We'll clean that up before we put it back on. And let's see, do I have 9/16 ready? I do. Let's see if we can just go ahead and pull these bolts off while we're here. That's 1. And 2. Gotta love these old Craftsman, such simple designs. There we go. Alright, so fuel tank, put that down as well, is ready to come off actually. So what we'll do, these little rubber bumpers have about had it, but I'm just going to tip this tank over, and what I'm going to do, this fuel grommet looks like it's good. We just need to take off the fuel line, and I want to be really careful because, well, I got a grommet, might as well change all this out, right? Because sometimes this thing will crack and then I'm kind of screwed because of the 90 degree. Have to buy a new one of them. But I think I got a fuel tank grommet. I'm gonna do what I can here. Maybe just spray some carb spray down in there and let it try and get some of that stuff out, because it doesn't sound like it's got a lot in it. So that's good. I'm going to take this fuel line off, take the fuel tank off, and we'll see what's in it. I'll let y'all know what I find. Alright, gas tank is back on. I have a new fuel tank grommet and shutoff valve, although you can't get the shutoff valve. That's all I had in the cards here at home currently, so that's okay. Now this seat safety does not, I don't think it prevents the starting of the machine because you hold the park brake down, so we're going to see if it'll start without that. What I'm going to do is put the gas cap back on it. The tank itself was actually relatively clean. I was surprised. I just sprayed a little bit of carb spray in it, just kind of wash it out a little bit. Put the new tank grommet on there since the one on it was nearly 30 years old. It's just a matter of time before it would have started leaking. And we're good. So I am going to, my hands are dirty, aren't they? Finish putting like a fuel filter on it. So this is the fuel line right here that I fed up through. There were some zip ties that held on all the wiring, and you just fed the fuel line right through there, and then just need to connect it to a fuel filter, and that's good. That line may be okay still. I just wanted to replace that hard fuel line. So I'm going to throw a fuel filter on this, finish connecting the line, and then I'll hook the jump box back to it. We may prime it with a little bit of carb spray to see if we can get it to pump, if this fuel pump is good or not. And as long as it does, then maybe this thing will run here in a minute or so. Okay, well, the fuel lines, fuel filter and all that stuff, I'll show you real quickly. We've put on. We may have to replace this fuel pump. That's no big deal if we do. And like I said, fuel filter. I'm going to hook the jump box up one more time. What I'm also going to do to help encourage it to start and pump fuel up is spray a little bit of carb spray in there, just so that it's pumping gas up a little bit faster. And then hopefully, I mean, I hear the little solenoid clicking in the carb, so I don't think that there's any varnish in this thing, but we'll find out. Let me grab the starter here, jump starter. Because like I said, I want to replace the ignition switch on this too, just because it's that cheapo plastic one that's not very good. Okay. Alright, so power it. Okay, it's powered. And that switch gets worse and worse. Alright, pour a little bit of carb spray. Let's see if it pumps gas, and hopefully it does. Alright. Let's see. It should start. Gas in the fuel filter over here. Let's try this one more time. Not yet. We do have gas in the fuel filter though, so let's try it once or twice more here. I think something's gummed up, guys. Man, what a bummer. All right, one more time. It's better than we had. That's kind of weird. It was kind of intermittent there. This could require 12 volts to stay running too. So one more time. What it is. As soon as that jump pack stopped throwing power to it, it quit. So that's exactly what it is. How about that, y'all? It may need a carb clean. We'll run it for a little while and see, but that's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and put the fender back on over here. I guess I'll go ahead and put the air filter and stuff back on as well. And we should be in good shape. I'll make sure it's charging and everything when I put a battery in it. And I just want to make sure, I just want to hear this thing run and drive around for right now. And then we'll sort out, I just need to figure out what length belt I need for the primary deck belt. And after that, a good cleaning, a little bit of ATF in the rear tires, and we may be in business, y'all. This is going to be awesome. So let me go ahead and put that rear fender back on and see what we end up doing here. All right, back panel's back on and batteries in it. Let's start it. That transmission is quiet too. I'm going to, so it's running and driving. I'm going to throw some ATF in the left rear tire and just drive it around a little bit and have it coat the tire, and hopefully, well, I'll put them in both rear tires. And hopefully that'll do what it needs to. Like I said, we're done for the day. Tomorrow I'm probably going to swap out that ignition switch just to make it run, or because that's something that you touch every time you do the tractor, and that plastic is going to get worse and worse, and it's not really that big of a deal to to change out the ignition switch. So probably I have plenty here, and I think I can find one that'll work. So let me do all that stuff. We'll drive it around a little bit, and then we'll move on to the deck. I'm going to let y'all go on a ride with me here in a second. I want to see if the battery's charging. I forgot to do that. So let's see. 13.9, I don't know if y'all can see that, so that's a plus. We may have to clean the carburetor on it. Might. We'll get to that a little later. But I mean, this transmission is silky smooth. Kind of evens out a little bit once you get a little bit of load on it. I don't have it at full throttle right now. Honestly, can't believe this thing's running and driving just after a couple hours of work, after I've let it sit outside for almost 2 years. But that's awesome. I love it. We do have a little bit of work left to do again, which we'll do tomorrow. Oh, by the way, I took the headlights out and cleaned them, reseated them. Keep the classic look on this. Let the LEDs be saved for the mowers that need maybe a little bit more to spruce them up, or I just save them for the ones that have broken bulbs. If both of them work, I'm not worried about replacing them. We'll see if this tire holds overnight. I'm going to clean the garage and call it a night, and I will rejoin y'all on the next day that I work on this. So I gave it a good wash. Again, the outside was relatively clean. Obviously, whenever I do some abrasive stuff, it kind of fades the paint a little bit, but the inside obviously looks a lot better now, so that's the biggest plus. And we're doing pretty good so far. Probably have to clean this headlight lens a little bit just to make it a little better, because a lot of that dirt gets in whenever you pressure wash it. We'll give a nice ATF shine on it just to help with the faded paint on the top, just from, you know, sun fade and 27 years of life. And we'll do a carb clean, ignition switch, and we'll put the primary deck belt on, which I'm waiting on here for a few days. So that's where we stand with this Craftsman garden tractor. Here at the end of part one, we've got it running, driving, cleaned up, all the air in the tires. Really not too bad. We just have a couple of housekeeping projects I want to go more in depth on. This video is already getting kind of long, so we're going to split this into part two. Part two, we're going to do all those things that I just mentioned. We're going to swap out the ignition switch. We are going to clean the carburetor, and we're going to put that primary deck belt on. This thing's getting really close to being done. I'm excited because this is going to be a really cool mower for somebody. Really nice mower whenever I get this finished. There's a lot of people out there that are looking for these old Craftsman garden tractors. Not as much as the hydros as the 6-speed high-lows, but they're still out there, and people know these things are workhorses. You can get them for pretty decent money nowadays too. So we'll see what this thing brings in the spring. Maybe somebody wants it for winter pulling. You never know. Thanks again for watching part 1 of this video of this Craftsman garden tractor from 1996. And we'll finish it up here in part 2. And I'll catch you on that next video when we finish this thing up.